Can everybody see a page? Yay! Amazing. Um, yeah, so my name is Ash, and my pronouns are he, him, and I can't move on to the next. Come on. There we go. Yeah, my pronouns are he, him. I'm a trans awareness trainer. I wrote the Queer Funeral Guide, which the full title is Making Informed Choices When Planning a Funeral, a guide for queer people. I also am leading a project for the charity Gyres, who are the Gender Identity Research Education Society. And that project is called Being Ready, and it's about trans and gender diverse people's experiences of end of life, palliative, funeral, memorial, and bereavement care. So we've just finished the training stage of that project, and now I'm just chained to a computer writing reports and going through documents and reading through surveys and things. So that's my life right now. And that's me speaking at an event. So the people always ask me, like, why did I write it? Like, how did this happen? So I was a new funeral arranger in London. This is my first job in funerals, and I'd had some training, and I'd kind of like got involved with a lot of really good local funeral directors who were sort of like really engaged in the community. And Natasha at Mortlake Crematorium was holding a festival called the Full Circle Festival. And so like local funeral like related businesses and charities and things all came to Mortlake on, I think it was the hottest day of the year. And everybody set up stalls. And Natasha said to me, like, we need some LGBT representation. Would you do a stall? Like, have you got, would you like to be involved? Would you like to sort of help us out with this? And I was like, yeah, of course, that sounds amazing. So I decided that I needed something to give to people because there's only so much you can just say. You want people to be able to take away information with them. So I said, I'm going to write like a little A5 leaflet. And Natasha was like, yeah, that sounds great. A little leaflet to give away would be fantastic. The A5 leaflet turned into a 20, I think it's 24 page, is it 24 pages? A booklet, a proper booklet, which we gave away to people that visited the store. And it was one of those things where I just started writing and I was like, no, I need to write more. There's a lot to say here. I have a lot to say. And it was a really, really good day. We had some great involvement, like great engagement, people coming up to the stall and talking about their experiences of working in funerals. And yeah, it was a very wholesome and lovely day. So why did I write it? Like I say, I wanted to give away this information, but when I was doing my training, I had a bunch of questions particularly about me being trans. And during the training, they weren't really addressed. They weren't answered. It wasn't a thing that people kind of spoke about really. And I was just really hung up on, but hang on a second, what happens to me? What happens to me if my family won't affirm me when I die? What happens to me if someone tries to register my death in my old name and my old gender? Is there a way of me making sure that no one just takes over everything? What is there that will protect me? Have we got legislation that protects us? Have we got, like what is there? And I had like 1,000 bajillion questions. And like as I was sort of looking at all of this stuff, it was like having little tiny pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and I would find one answer to something, but then I would have more questions about something else. And I was trying to kind of like piece everything together to sort of like to make this guide, and it was quite a labor of love, but it was worth it, I think. One of the things that people told me when I was doing some research to write this booklet, they told me some experiences of working in funerals, and these are things that some of them really, really upset me. Some of them didn't surprise me. And some of them just made me kind of think, okay, well, this is a really good idea. Maybe this is what we should be doing. So I had one funeral director who was almost tearful when they told me that they were instructed to hold this funeral for a trans woman, but the spouse of the trans woman didn't want to affirm her. So she had a gender recognition certificate. She'd been living as herself for years, but the spouse just couldn't say goodbye to the woman that she was. And so the funeral, although the paperwork was all done correctly with her affirmed name because she had a gender recognition certificate, the funeral was held for this man who, she was no longer that person. So the funeral director was asked to dress her in men's clothing, and she was really upset. And she kind of kept saying that she would like apologize to the person, like as she was dressing her, saying, I know this isn't who you are. I know this isn't what you want, but I'm really sorry, this is what my client has instructed me to do. And that really, really stuck with me because I know working in funerals, you have a client who instructs you what to do, and you have a contract with that client, and there's a lot of things that you just have to take as written from what they're telling you about the person. So I kind of like was thinking, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Because it is legal. It's completely legal for somebody to hold a funeral for someone, and that's not their identity. It's horrible that there is this stupid loophole in the law. Um, but some of the things that gave me hope, I spoke to a crematoria worker, and they were looking after a young non-binary person who had died, and it was really important to the family that their gender identity was respected when they died. But because of the way death registration of the law works, only male and female genders are recognized in UK law. So this crematoria worker said, right, we're just going to add a little box on the cremation form that says non-binary, because where it says, what is the gender of this person, ticking male or female, neither of those things are true. So they added a little box that said non-binary. And although the person's death was registered in the gender they were assigned at birth, the fact that the crematoria worker and the funeral director and the family had all had this conversation meant that they had something that was this little piece of like authenticity, this little piece of recognition that this person is who they were. And that for me gives me a little bit of kind of like light and hope that, there's stuff that we can do even when the world around us isn't built for non-binary people. And what I think one of the saddest stories I heard was about a faith leader who, during the funeral, outed the person who died as intersex. And there were people there that didn't know this person was intersex. The people that did know they were intersex knew that it was a very private part of their life that they didn't really speak about and didn't want other people to know about. So when this faith leader publicly spoke about it during the funeral, it was really distressing to everybody that was there. And so kind of all of these experiences that people have told me, it makes me think, we need to change things. We need to educate people. But I think the most important thing is we need to arm people, LGBTQ people, with ways to make sure that these things don't happen to them, which involves basically planning our own funerals. So one of the questions I ask at the beginning of my guide is, are funeral professionals queer friendly? And at this point, I just want to kind of like open up the floor to some of you. You can pop things in the chat. I don't know, I can't see the chat, but David, hopefully you can read a few things out for me. So can you just pop in that? What does queer friendly, what does the phrase queer friendly mean to you? Does it spark any sort of thoughts or feelings? Is it something that you think, yes, it makes me think that people are going to look after LGBTQ people? Pop your thoughts in the chat. I can see people typing.
So someone's put sharing our pronouns. We've got allyship, acceptance, and authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Queer friendly should mean no judgment and acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Lovely.
Welcoming and accepting, full acceptance and welcoming of LGBTQ people. They'll accept and listen to their wishes and preferences and act according to these, and then be open and listening.
Lovely. Really, really good. Lovely. So what about the term queer affirming? Does that mean anything to anyone? Do you think that might mean something slightly different from queer friendly? Would being queer affirming involve a different kind of level of care? Would it involve more than sharing your pronouns, for example? Any thoughts on that?
We've got someone that says, I'm not sure, to be honest. Someone else that says, an advocate, question mark. Someone's put, hang on, there's loads coming in. Creating an open and welcoming environment, e.g. signalling a rainbow, flag sticker in the window, addition to the religious symbols a lot of funerals homes have. Someone else has put, queer friendly means they won't go against our wishes, but queer affirming means they'll have planned ahead, give us a greater degree of understanding. Someone else
Hmm.
has put a more proactive approach, I think.
Hmm.
And the next person's put, I do worry that the word queer can be difficult
Hmm.
for older gay men, for example. Um,
Absolutely.
Annette's put support of LGBTQ plus people's identity and ensuring their needs and wishes are advocated for. Next person's put aligning services and procedures to reflect people's identity. And then someone else has put, I've not heard of it, but I imagine it's advocacy, proactivity. And then
Hmm.
lastly, we've got actively adopting and centering queer narratives and approaches.
Fantastic. Oh, you're all brilliant. That's really, really good. Yeah, for me, the difference between queer friendly and queer affirming is if somebody is sort of like a friendly organization, yeah, they're going to greet me with a smile. There'll be sort of like, hopefully, there'll be signs in the space that say that they're LGBT friendly or LGBT affirming. Um, and that level of sort of it will be like the signaling that yeah, we're a nice space. Yeah, we are not going to judge you. We care about you. Whereas for me, queer affirming is more about sort of like understanding the things that LGBTQ plus people might have gone through, understanding things like, there might be situations to do with estranged family that are different for LGBTQ plus people than they might be for cisgender people who have lost touch with their families. So it's that kind of like slightly deeper understanding and a kind of way of saying, yeah, we get this, and this is how we're going to make sure that you have what you need. And then my question at the end, which is what is a safe space? It's one of those questions where, it can be anything. I took part in a study recently about safe spaces for queer people, and one of the things that was raised was like, is there ever really a truly 100% safe space for anyone? Is that a thing that can ever exist? Because we're all fallible human beings. I can misgender someone by accident, so all of the things that could happen that might make someone feel uncomfortable can potentially happen. There's nowhere is perfectly safe and kind of wrapped in cotton wool. Um, but I think what we need to think about is how we create like the safest possible spaces we can with the services that we offer people. So everything that's been mentioned already about having sort of like like rainbow flags or some kind of signage, like the way that other events or like religions and things are sort of dotted around the place, something that says yes, we know you, we will look after you. um but I think particularly with trans people, it kind of goes deeper than that into understanding the intricacies of registering a death of a person who's trans, for example, and things like understanding about sort of like civil partnerships and marriages and laws and you know the next of kin and the order of intestacy and things that people might take for granted but might be slightly different for LGBTQ plus people. I've got on a waffle there because I can't see my notes, but it's fine. So yeah, so what I want to kind of like talk about here, what I want to highlight is why sometimes queer people don't feel welcome. And actually, before I go on, somebody did mention the word queer sometimes being a difficult one for people to hear. And I just want to acknowledge absolutely 100% I hear that and I agree with that. And it is a word that is being reclaimed by the LGBTQ plus community. Some people have got really, really horrific experiences of that word being used towards them in a horrible way. Other people are reclaiming it. Other people have never had a difficult experience with that word and have a lot of joy around the word queer. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say that I hear you and I'm not kind of dismissing that. So yeah, so why wouldn't a queer person feel welcome? Something that people say a lot to me is when we're dead, we're all the same, which isn't true. Because when we're dead, we've come with whole lives before we've died. And we come with complex relationships and experiences of that journey towards death. For example, if somebody has had a long illness, they will have had experiences with healthcare that might not have been great. So by the time the family comes to the funeral directors, or by the time that person comes to you and says, I want you to do my funeral, there'll be a whole lifetime full of things that will have happened. And if their experiences have not always been great, then they're going to be slightly careful in who they trust. So, what's happening at the moment, particularly with trans people, which is my experience, there's a lot of stuff about how, and let's face it, it's always directed towards trans women. Somehow trans men don't really get a mention, but there's lots of talk around trans women making spaces for women unsafe. So this idea that if you have a toilet and a trans woman is allowed to use that toilet, then cisgender women are always automatically going to feel um, threatened or intimidated. And I mean, the reality of the situation is that is, the experiences are very few and far between. And I think that if anyone is intimidated by a trans woman using a toilet, there will have been cisgender women who will have had an intimidating presence in that toilet too. So it's like not something that is specific to trans women. So what we are hearing from the previous government is, they wanted to ban the idea of unisex toilets in all public buildings. So there was never ever a thing where people said we always have to have unisex toilets or we always have to have gender neutral toilets. So something that the government had kind of fabricated as a way of whipping up, angst and worry and all the rest of it over something that's not even a thing. The NHS have been looking at their policies and thinking about changing things and saying that trans women can't use female only spaces. So trans women couldn't be on a female ward, for example. And when you actually look into that, somebody did a freedom of information request, and there weren't any complaints from patients in hospitals about trans women being on those wards. And in actual fact, what business is it of any of us knowing about the other people on a ward anyway? I don't want to know someone's medical history. I don't want to know someone else's business. I'm just there to get better. So, that should be the case with everyone. So, and this might not feel relevant to funerals, but like this is stuff that people carry, like particularly trans people carry with them. And then when you get to a point where you're really vulnerable, you need help for end of life and palliative care, or you need help with arranging a funeral, or your person has just died and you're approaching a funeral director. These are things that you might have experienced recently. So you're going to be a little bit wary. You're going to be a little bit distrusting. Some people might be angry. Some people might be just really, really distressed. And I think it's important to kind of like hold that and just be aware that sometimes this is what's happened. And these are reasons why queer people don't always feel welcome. We went through, like, I had my whole school career with a piece of legislation called Section 28 in place, which meant that teachers couldn't talk about, they couldn't promote a gay lifestyle. So basically, when I was bullied at school, my teachers looked the other way because by addressing the bullying would mean that they were affirming my queer identity, which would mean that they were promoting a homosexual lifestyle. So I've grown up with knowing that people in authority are not looking out for me. So it makes sense that I'm going to be slightly, distrusting, or might take me a minute to kind of say, okay, yeah, you're a safe person. This is a slide that I always feel is necessary to share with people because a lot of people say to me, oh, things are getting better, it's really, really good. Progress has already happened. What are you worried about? But and this is again specific to transphobic hate crimes. So we can look at like the rise in hate crimes from 2011. We had less than 500 incidents of hate crime that were reported to the police, and these are the Home Office's statistics. And we fast forward, so you've got 2015, 2016. Things start to get a little bit worse because the government start looking at the Gender Recognition Act and maybe reforming it. And then we get to 2020 and 2021. Transphobic hate crime has just shot through the roof. We've got nearly 4,500 incidents that are being reported. So a lot of them aren't reported. So this is obviously just a little snapshot. And you might think, okay, but surely this is because more people are reporting these hate crimes. But when you look at the difference between other forms of hate crime that are being reported, particularly, people reporting hate crimes because of their sexuality, for example, there's still, 600 incidents being reported in 2020 and 2021, which is too much. But the amount of transphobic hate crime is still, it's a huge difference. It's a huge increase on other forms of hate crime that are being reported. Um, so things are not just getting better. Progress is not just happening. It's still something that we need to fight for and that we need to work on. Um, and I've jumped to what's in the funeral guide. But like before I jump forward from that, I just want to say that even though there's a lot of horrible stuff happening, there's lots of difficult things that people are coping with, there is a lot of joy out there, and there's lots and lots of people who work in death, dying, and bereavement who are incredible and affirming and doing amazing work and really, really just the best people. So I don't want you to think that I'm just, you know, hating on everyone because I'm not. So yeah, so the funeral guide that I wrote, I included some stuff in there about confidentiality because I thought one of the things that people do worry about is being outed or people finding out about their LGBTQ plus identity after they've died. So somebody might not be out to all members of their family. And if you go to a funeral director and, the funeral director finds out that this person is gay and then tells one of the bearers who then tells someone else at a funeral, and then Uncle John is standing at the back of the hall and overhears somebody say, "Oh yeah, that guy was gay." That's not how you would want to find out that your relative was gay, for example. And I'm not saying that that's not a specific kind of scenario, but it's something that could potentially happen. And in the same way that with healthcare, you wouldn't tell anybody about a protected characteristic or about something to do with their health condition unless they absolutely needed to know it. The same goes with funerals. So when my best friend died, we spoke to the funeral director. We told her that she was trans. She knew, and it was something that was celebrated anyway because the person that died was out as a trans woman. But we said we need this funeral to be listed as private so that it's not just out there in the ether, because we knew that there were transphobic people that had previously tried to dox my friend to her employer. So there were things that we put in place, and the funeral director was amazing. She said, "Yeah, absolutely. We'll treat it like any other funeral where it would be sensitive. Like if you have like a high profile person, for example, you want to make sure that information doesn't get out there." It's a similar kind of thing. So they were really good and really sensitive about that. I talk about registering a death. Talk about when somebody goes to register a death. For example, if I went to register a death, I wouldn't have to bring my identity documents with me. So if I hadn't changed my name during my transition, I could still, I could go without any ID and still register that person's death as long as I kind of qualify as one of the people that can do it. So that's one of the things that people often worry about. If you're trans and you're in the process of changing your ID, if you're in the process of sort of seeking help from professionals or anything like that, you might not have updated all of your documents. You might be in the process of changing your name. It's quite a long thing, a long process sometimes. So things like registering a death or signing any paperwork or anything like that can be a little bit of a hassle sometimes for trans people. I talk about dressing the person who's died, and this is because in my time as a funeral arranger, I remember people talking about the what's it called, like the shrouds, the little paper robes that you get, that people wear if you don't want to be dressed in your own clothes. And I think we had pink, blue, and white. And I was always like, can we just dispense with the pink and blue, please? Let's make that go away. And I wanted people to understand that you can wear anything you want as long as the rules of the cemetery or crematoria, like you can't have synthetic fabrics in a natural burial site, for example. So, but I wanted people to know that, like, however you dressed in life, that's how people can be dressed after they've died. You can be as flamboyant as you want. You can be as, sort of like smart as you want, whatever you want. I want to be dressed in my pajamas, so I think it's nice and cozy. I included some stuff around collecting the ashes because for some people, if their family haven't been supportive and they're the ones that to sort of take care of the funeral, and then maybe they don't want to collect the ashes and they're just kind of sitting there, there might be like chosen family who would want to go and claim the ashes. And I want to make it clear that there is a process where whoever it is that signs the cremation form is the person that collects the ashes, or they instruct somebody else to do that. And there's like a whole, legal way of doing things. So I wanted to be quite clear that that can work for and against people in some cases. If you don't want your family to have your ashes, you can make sure you've got someone that you trust who's doing your funeral, and they're the one that does the application for cremation. um, I've also got some stuff around making sure that your wishes are respected when you die. And I really hammer home the point that if there's any query over the people around you not affirming you after you've died in any way whatsoever, write a will. Like, make sure that it's witnessed and signed. Make sure that you've got like a letter of wishes that doesn't conflict with your will. Choose, someone you trust to be the executor of your will. Choose a funeral director that you trust. So I kind of like really encourage people to do all of that. But what I'm finding through the project I'm currently doing is that it's very difficult for people to write down their wishes. And I'll talk about that again in a second. And then there's a section at the end with support and further information. And it's a free download at www.queerfuneralguide.co.uk. So you can all go and download it. And if it's something that you want to give to clients or people that you help, or friends or family or whatever, give them the link, they can download it too. If you are a funeral director and you want to host it on your website, or a celebrant and you want it on your website, pop me an email through the website, and I'll say yes or no. Basically, I like to vet people. Sorry. So yeah, and that's fine, because my thing is that the more people that have this information, the better. It needs updating because it was written in 2019, but it's all the legal stuff is still true. So making funeral plans is hard. We know that. We know that it's hard for everybody, but it's especially hard sometimes for LGBTQ plus people. One of the people that I spoke to in the project that I'm currently doing was saying that they were really worried about being misgendered after they died. And they were really worried about like what kind of expectations other people would have about what their funeral should be like. And I think that this is something that people find it difficult to maybe state their needs and say, I want this. But then you have to go that extra step of, writing a will, or writing down your wishes, finding someone that you trust to be listed as your next of kin for going into hospital, finding someone that you trust to be the executor of your will. All of these things, it's like these extra bits of admin that, when you're already worried about this other stuff, it just feels really overwhelming. And there's another person that we spoke to said that they literally, they transitioned, they've only just started to live. And the thought about sitting down and writing down funeral wishes, planning end of life care, it's like, okay, I haven't even really lived yet, and now you're asking me to do this. So I get that it's really, really hard. So what I say to people is, write anything, something down. Doesn't matter how small it is, doesn't matter if it's a scribble on a piece of paper, doesn't matter if it's a drawing of something. Just get something down so that there is something that people can go on, and tell someone about that and where it is. Tell them what your wishes are. I'm trying to find ways with the resource that I'm creating at the moment of having like a buddy system, or like having community groups where people can come together and work through like a little book for writing down their wishes and things like that. Because having that support from your community and the people around you that really get you and understand you might be a way of helping people to kind of overcome some of the barriers that they've got around doing this. Attending death cafes, I think, is a really, really good start for some people who just haven't thought about how to get their head around funeral planning, because it normalizes that conversation about death. And you're in a place with other people who are interested and open to talking about it. And there isn't that awkward, like, oh, when I die, will you play this song, please? So you can just have a conversation, and it doesn't feel as awkward. And there's a really good resource that Hospice UK have, which is called the Death Book, which is a very simple tool for writing down your wishes for end of life care and funeral planning. And it's nice big print. It's just very basic, simple questions, not too detailed. So it's easy to kind of process, rather than going through like a great big massive end of life care plan type thing. And as I say, I'm currently writing a resource for the trans and gender diverse community, which will hopefully be for anyone to use. It doesn't have to just be trans and gender diverse people. So yeah, we want to find a way that's accessible, that's not too daunting, not too confronting, but still has everything that you need to have in it, that people can kind of work through. And I don't know if anyone has heard of a project called No Barriers Here, but they are working on ways for people from all different kinds of backgrounds, to approach sort of funeral planning and end of life planning in different ways. So it will be through artwork, it will be through sort of like, yeah, making a collage, or doing like videoing something. And it's a more creative way of doing it, but a way that's more accessible to a lot of people so they can get their wishes down in some way. So it's really good to look into that if you're interested. My key takeaways. What time is it? David, what's the time? I just don't know how much time I have.
You got loads of time, Ash.
Okay,
35 minutes past 11 at the moment.
amazing. I always bomb through and then I'm like, oh, okay, I could have slowed down. So yeah, so my key takeaways that I would like you to take away are, if you're a funeral provider or a celebrant or anyone who works in sort of like death, dying, and bereavement care, learn about LGBTQIA plus history and learn about what's happening currently. So, as much as I hate to tell people to dip into the news every now and then, because it can be really stressful, I think it's really important to just keep up to date with the things that are going on, because there have been some quite anti-trans policies that are being tried to be pushed through. There's lots of really difficult stuff in the media that's happening, and I think if you're aware that that is out there, if an LGBTQIA plus person comes to you and says, "Oh yeah, the news is really awful," you don't have to say, "Oh, what news is that? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." You could say, "Oh yeah, no, I've heard that things are a little bit hard," and you're affirming that, you're not just dismissing that and saying, "Oh, what have you got to worry about?" You'll be aware of what's going on, and the struggles that people are currently having, as well as the nice joyful things that happen too. um Encourage people to record stuff, record their care plan, record their will, record their funeral wishes, write things down in whatever way works for them. um I think one of the really important things is not making assumptions about who someone's next of kin is. So, whenever I've gone into hospital for anything, it's like, oh, who's your next of kin? Is it your mum? Is it your dad? And for me, it is my mum or my dad. But for someone else, it would be, no, it's my flatmate or it's my best friend. So, not making that assumption is a really important thing. Um, and not outing people as LGBTQ plus, because not everyone in their life will know that they're queer, and they might be estranged from their family. They might have been on the receiving end of horrible abuse from their family. So if you out someone by accident, it can have really, really awful effects sometimes. So not to scare you, but also it's really important not to out people. And I would like everybody's homework to be to brush off on the Equality Act and the Gender Recognition Act, because those are two pieces of legislation that do protect LGBTQ plus people. The Gender Recognition Act is specifically for trans people. And knowing how those acts work, knowing how it applies in a workplace, knowing how it applies in a healthcare space is really important. When somebody dies, all of their rights die with them. So these acts don't apply to people who have died. But I would argue that the people that are close to them should be protected. And they are protected by the Equality Act. They should be protected by the Gender Recognition Act as well. Because if you are transphobic towards somebody like, and basically you're being transphobic towards the person that knows them in an indirect way. So these acts should protect people from being harassed and discriminated against. Um, and don't forget about people's spiritual care needs. So there are some wonderful resources, which some of them you'll have in your resources sheet that Dave, I think, can share with you, or hopefully by email. So there's some great things around spiritual care for LGBTQ plus people. Not all faith and belief groups are affirming and friendly. Some will say they're affirming and friendly, but really they're not. They just want to get you in there and then tell you that you're a sinner and that you should, not be gay. So finding out what's local to you, finding out where you can signpost people, and you know that's a safe space. That's an enormous thing, especially at this time in someone's life where people might not have been a part of their faith or belief group for a while, but when a death happens, a lot of people will reconnect with their faith and belief group. So having a safe space for them to do that is really important. Hospital chaplains tend to be really, really good because they've got the NHS policy behind their working. So they cannot discriminate because they're employed by the NHS. So hospital chaplains are a really good resource. And if you're able to have sort of like signposting and things visible in the place where you work, having stuff for trans healthcare is really great. So there is an organisation called UCATS, which is the UK Cancer and Transition Service, and it's a new service, and you can self-refer. So if you're a trans person who also has cancer or a history of cancer, and you're having difficulty accessing gender affirming healthcare, they can help you. They have multidisciplinary meetings. It's run by an oncologist called Dr. Alison May Berner. She's absolutely fantastic. It's really, really good service to know about. And there's another organization called Outpatients, which similarly has like an oncology kind of background, but it's a support group for people, LGBTQ plus people who either have cancer or a history of cancer and their partners and people around them. So it's like a peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer support group plus other forms of support and advocacy as well. Really, really good to know about both of those. And there's more resources as well that I'll give you in that sheet at the end. So my next job, I've done the training for the Being Ready project, which I've got some pictures at the end if anybody wants to see them. So that's finished now, but I am currently writing a resource for the community, which should be out in September, and the final report about the whole project, about what we did, about how people responded to the training. We've interviewed people in the community. We did a survey from the community about what people's worries were, about what their experiences were of death, dying, and bereavement. So that will be released in December. Yeah, December 2024. So yeah, so I'm a bit busy to the end of the year, and who knows what will happen after that. Hopefully more training because I really enjoyed that. But sadly, I can't do everything all at once. And I need to update my queer funeral guide because 2019 suddenly seems like a long time ago. But yeah, we'll get there. So yeah, this resources sheet you'll have it's a PDF that they can email you. Some amazing stuff on the Transactual website. They've got some great resources, little guides around healthcare, guides about the equality law. The faith and belief resource that I spoke about is called Roadmap to Inclusion. So that's by the charity that I'm doing this project for, Gyres. And Switchboard, if no one's heard of them, they have a helpline for LGBTQIA plus people. That's a really good thing to have if you've got someone who is, sort of like struggling with something, rather than saying, oh, call the Samaritans, who are lovely, but sometimes a bit hit and miss. I once got a very transphobic Samaritan, which was deeply unhelpful. Switchboard us run by and for LGBTQIA plus people. So it's a really, really good resource to be able to point people to. Yeah. So thank you for listening to me.